Sagan. Welcome to our live conversation on your money and the economy right now. So the U.S. is expected to reach its debt limit today, according to the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. So lawmakers do have a few months to negotiate until the government actually defaults. Right now, the debt ceiling stands at $31.4 trillion, and it has been modified more than 100 times since World War II. Once the debt limit is reached, the Treasury Department will begin implementing what they call extraordinary measures, and that's to delay a default in order to avoid a financial crisis. Essentially, if the government is no longer able to borrow, it would not have enough money to pay all its bills. And that means it would likely have to temporarily delay payments or default on some of its commitments. And that could potentially affect things like Social Security payments, veterans benefits, federal employee salaries, among other things. So today we're joined live by Marty Cantor to discuss that debt ceiling and so much more. He's a CPA and economic development consultant, a doctor of education, and a former associate professor of economics. And do remember, we want to hear from you. For the next half hour, we will be answering your questions, so you can submit them now under the live stream of the show on our Facebook pages. So we do have to start with this debt ceiling drama. You know, obviously they're going to start taking some emergency steps today to stay under that debt limit, but the Treasury Secretary is going to need to, shift some federal funds around, buy ourselves some more time. But I mean, this could be a big issue here, Marty.
Well, we don't have to worry about this until June. That's when it really happens.
Yeah.
It's really a political football at this point. But the reality is this: Social Security and all the really vested programs, they're not going to be impacted. It's politically untenable if they touch veterans benefits or Social Security, things of that nature. The reality is we're spending too much money. I mean, that's really where the discussion is. Right now, it's $31.4 trillion in national debt. Our GDP is about $21 trillion. It's the highest level of distance between the GDP and the debt limit ever. And that's what they're arguing about. They want to cut discretionary spending. They want to cap the federal budget from going up automatically on discretionary items. And that's where the argument's going to be. Somewhere along the line, we had this with President Obama and the Congress, and they put in restrictions on increasing government spending for about 8-9 years, and that kept the deficit down and debt spending down. What the default really means, if the federal government does default, and since we have so much debt out there, we drive a lot of the interest rates. If you default, that means you have more risk. More risk means higher interest rates. Higher interest rates mean higher long-term debt and mortgages, and that's what they're trying to avoid. But right now, there's just a lot of alarmism and saber rattling by Majority Leader Schumer, to say that we got to do this thing. I think they'll come to a solution, no doubt about it. But the House is going to dig their heels in and say they want to see some reduction in spending. And something, with the kind of spending we've been seeing, since 2016, 17, 18, we might, through the current year, a cutback in spending might be called for order.
All right, let's talk about those unemployment numbers. The benefits fell last week to their lowest level in 16 weeks. Those initial claims dropping by another 15,000, coming in at 190, Marty, for the week.
Yeah. Listen, clearly, this is an inflationary period that unlike any other, and that's why we've been saying for a long time that it's going to probably be a soft landing. Maybe even avoiding recession, because the whole idea in a recession is you lose jobs, and we're not losing jobs. We're seeing layoffs in Microsoft. They're laying off 5% of the workforce, 10,000 people. A local party, Palace Place, they're filing bankruptcy. We're going to see instances like that. However, we're still creating jobs. People aren't quitting. And the unemployment is a good sign. That tells you that what the Fed is doing is working to a certain extent. However, it means that if we do, looks like we could avoid a recession, because remember, a recession is inflation, high unemployment, and negative GDP, and we're certainly waiting for the gross domestic product numbers for the fourth quarter of 2022 to be published this month.
Right. We do have those PPI numbers in for December, and it fell more than expected.
Well, this is really some good news in terms of, are we going to avoid, is inflation going to be coming to an end, and will we be avoiding a recession?
Right.
Last March, there was about a 3.5% gap between the PPI, Producer Price Index, which was about 12.1%, and the Consumer Price Index, which was 9%. So really, the Producer Price Index increases was driving the inflation and driving Consumer Price Index. Now they're both the same.
Yeah.
Producer Price Index is 6.2%, CPI is 6.1%. So if it follows the same scenario, a dropping Producer Price Index will bring down the Consumer Price Index, and that's important because the Federal Reserve is looking at a 2% target for inflation. So this means that we could be moving with lower inflation as we go into 2023, and we could be out of this towards the end of 2023.
Yeah, which is, I mean, really great news, because I feel as though, so many of us are complaining about the price of everything. So things are actually moving in the right direction.
Well, the one thing that's not moving in the right direction are food products,
Right.
groceries, and
Eggs.
things like that. And that really is happening because of the increased feed, the war in Ukraine, the wheat prices, increased labor. That has to come down. When the food prices come down, that'll really be a strong indication that this inflation is getting beaten.
And, when we talk about debt, recently we've been really talking about, consumers here, but we took a look globally, and the world is in a lot of debt. $300 trillion to be exact, Marty. That's the total amount that governments, households, and corporations around the world owed in June of 22.
And how about this? The United States is 13% of that debt. That's incredible. 31 trillion in federal debt, and another 12 trillion in consumer debt, and that doesn't even count the mortgages and everything else that we have. So we're probably close to 15% of the world's debt. That's a big number.
Yeah, it really is. And we saw those retail sales falling in December. There was that revision, by 1% in November, but the Commerce Department came out with those numbers. Were you surprised?
No, because we talked about this, I think, in November, because October retail numbers were high, and that was because the retailers started the sales, and we talked about discretionary income and a finite amount of dollars that consumers had to spend after they went into debt and they went into their savings. So it's not surprising because, it's a zero-sum game. You only have so much discretionary income to spend on gifts and toys and stuff like that. And the consumer ran out of money after October, because November and December had negative retail sales.
And I guess they weren't spending that money at Party City. They filed for bankruptcy to restructure, their debt.
I called it Party Place, but yeah, it's Party City. Yeah, exactly. And we're seeing a change of consumers' habits. Let's see if they recover. I think once the money comes in, inflation comes down, people are going to want to, get happy and spend happy again. And so we'll see. But yeah, the places that you spend discretionary income are having a problem.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, the businesses who took out those idle loans, nearly 3.8 million small businesses, Marty, taking out these economic injury disaster loans from the federal government, just about 100,000 per loan. Small Business Administration. We did lots of coverage on this, but all of a sudden we've got to pay it back. And the money is starting to come due by the end of this month.
Yeah, people thought, okay, I got the EIDL. They're not going to ask for the money for a couple of years, so let me just get the money. But now they got the money, and the money is restricted on what you can spend it for. You can't take it and put it into a savings account and generate income so you can pay down the interest. So a lot of small businesses now, starting in October, November, are actually having to pay significant interest payments on the money that they're not using. Normally, you'd use that money, invest it in your business, get a return on that capital, and that capital would be used to pay down the debt and the interest. But if it's just sitting in a cash account that can't generate income, having that loan and having that comfort of having that cash available is going to cost you 3.5% a year.
All right, coming up next, we're going to continue this conversation, including what's happening in housing right now and markets. Also, up on news12.com right now, we have planning, programs, resources for your small businesses. If you need help, scan the code.